Hi, Cheryl. Gary, glad you're here, brother. Carrie, how the heck are ya? Brother Rob Glock. Rob Glock. Can't beat that. Hi, Kathy. Bill J said hi. Brother David. Hey, Rodney. Cheryl, glad you're with us. And Jerry as well. Brother Glenn. What's happening, buddy? Thanks for the coffee today. Angie, how you doing? I bet Roderick's not far away. Glad to have you guys. Evening indeed. What's going on, David? Folks, let us not forget to follow the community standards. What does that even mean? Community standards. Evidently, they've never been to Pittsburgh. Hey, Greg, glad you're here, brother. Brother Larry. Glad you're here, man. Welcome to all you watching over here on YouTube. Welcome everybody to Infidel Coffee Hour Live, episode number 147. Yeehaw. Indeed. Do as you wish and obey those communist standards. As I said, remember to follow those community standards. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're having a great Sunday evening. I am. Got out and did a little visiting with the family today. Kind of nice. Wasn't too bad out, to tell you the truth. Looks like we've got some warmer weather coming, but let us not forget that we have another month of winter that lies ahead up here in the Great White North. I know, talk about a bummer. All this other news pales in comparison to that. Yeah, we're at war. We're going to starve to death, but there's another freaking month of winter left. That's like the most depressing news of all. I can't take it anymore. Yeah. This wasn't a bad winter this year either, actually. It wasn't too shabby, to tell you the truth. Good at taking orders. Yeah, tell me about it. I hear you, Rodney. Yeah. It's called being subordinate. I've never been subordinate. Coffee's going down good tonight. Hope everybody's having a good evening, like I said. We're going to start off tonight with a few odds and ends. Lots of interesting things going on in the world. For those that have read their Bible, much of it should come as absolutely no surprise to any of you. I keep seeing these videos of elected officials chewing on the asses of others that are breaking the laws of this nation. You know the ones, you see them. And they just gnaw ass. They expose how belligerently unruly many of our elected officials are. And they get up there at the podium and they talk to people as though the things they're revealing were unknown until the moment they spoke it. Brother Nailgun Larry Sr. is in the house, and I'm sure family is in tow. Glad to have you guys. But they get up there and they give these great speeches, and they're just gnawing ass on these people. And they act like this is some great epiphany. Look, we know what's going on. Ken, glad you're here. We know what's going on. And the problem I have with this, so after all of these breaking news broadcasts, I'd love that I don't own a TV, so when I go over to Glenn's house or my mom's or wherever, someone that's got a TV, it seems like every time there's something on the news, it's got that big red banner, breaking, we got a breaking news. Everything's breaking news today. You got to get that blood pressure up so everybody's scared or on edge. So after all of these breaking news broadcasts and emotionally charged speeches that these people give, and Tucker Carlson's no less guilty, although he's not an elected official, and I don't know what we could ever expect of him other than expose the truth. But all these elected officials, these congressmen, these senators, all of these people, and they expose true corruption, but who out of all of them has the fucking balls to do anything about it? It's like they drone on and on about all of the things that these people are doing. Who is there to stop the $1.5 trillion omnibus bill that was passed at 1:30 in the morning, unbeknownst to many of those that were supposed to be present? The memo never went out. They didn't know it was even going on. So at midnight, they convened. And by 1:30 a.m. that morning, they had passed a $1.5 trillion omnibus bill, void of anyone that would have challenged it or suggested amendments. Or furthermore, the $16.3 billion sent to Ukraine, one of the most corrupt countries on the face of the earth. Make no mistake about it. That nation is corrupt. Now, does that mean we should abandon them? I don't know. I don't know that we have any dog in this fight at all. But in essence, the whole world kind of has a dog in the fight. But it really isn't going to do any good. No matter what we do, this is going to snowball and escalate out of control. So who has the balls to stop any of this anti-American policies being vomited out by the Democrat Party? And mind you, folks, the Republicans are absolutely no better. They ought to call them the Republicrats and the frickin' Demoblicans is what they should be called. They all point out what we already know, and no one does shit about it. Boards and panels and studies and investigations that cost the taxpayers millions of dollars, while they hand trillions out to foreign countries as America just languishes. So here's some rough math I wanted to do while I was bored. Having just passed this omnibus bill, and of course there's still a couple other steps involved here before it goes through, but nonetheless we've got a $1.5 trillion omnibus bill that's packed full of pork. Worthless shit that will never benefit the American people. So if you take $1.5 trillion, if you divide that among the 331,449,281 people in America, that would be $4,525,583.21 per person. And that's based on the April 2020 census, okay? That's a lot of money. Think about the good that would do for all the Americans, okay? But that's never going to happen. So if they can just print that much money for the omnibus bill, which is packed, like I said, full of government waste, as they always are, and again, very little of that ever trickles down and benefits the American people, ever, why not give it to the people that need it and deserve it? Furthermore, if they can just print money out of thin air, why tax the people at all? Thus causing many to live lives well below the poverty line across this nation. Folks, you have been tricked into a life of slavery and servitude. That's the answer to that question. They don't want that shit you call money. They have no use for that stuff you call money. And why would they? It's absolutely worthless. And they know it's worthless. So why print it? Why do we still pretend that it possesses value of any kind? Sure, we can trade it back and forth. It reminds me of those sharecropper days. I think that's what it was called, when they would have these people come in and they would work their asses off on these farms, okay? And then they would get paid in script that was printed by whoever owned that farm, and then you could only use that script within the confines of that farm to buy goods that were at inflated prices. And so you were trapped. And so they knew where to set the prices. They knew what to pay you in script. And so you worked your ass off all week. You got paid your worthless script. You took it to the store there on the farm. I think Tennessee Ernie Ford sang a song about that. 13 tons, what do you get? Another day older and the deeper in debt. And so you take that script and you go to the store and you buy just enough to get by with this worthless script, buying goods at inflated prices, and you languished. And that's exactly what's happened in America today. They have printed this worthless script that nobody of any power or knowledge wants anything to do with. It amazes me how many people have been so deceived to think that money is actually wealth of any kind. So why print it? So why do we still pretend that it possesses value of any kind? Any value it represented, because that's all it ever did, was just simply represent value. Without faith, it's a faith-based currency, folks, because without the faith, as soon as the faith of the people is no longer in the currency, it will topple, and it's already heading that direction anyway. It was always worthless paper. That's all it's ever been. Paper that, if presented to the Treasury and requested, could have been at one point in history redeemed in silver or gold. But that ended a long time ago, and we've talked about this at great length. They convinced people that were actually adamantly opposed to worthless paper money that it was as good as gold. After all, it read right on the banknotes at that time, redeemable to the bearer in gold or silver upon bearer's demand. So you just simply took this worthless script to the Treasury at that time, because they were called silver certificates and gold certificates, and it said right on there, redeemable to the bearer upon demand in silver and gold, whether it was a $5 bill, a $1 bill, a $50 bill, a $100 bill, whatever it was, and it was redeemable at that time. And now, mind you, silver was worth a dollar an ounce, and gold was worth $35 an ounce at that time. But that's ancient history. It's no longer that way. Gold is like $2,200 an ounce if you want to buy it, and silver is about $32 to $34 an ounce. Now, that's the rate of inflation, or what I consider to be the rate of devaluation. And so that ended a long time ago. They convinced these people that were adamantly opposed to worthless paper money that it was as good as gold. After all, it read on the banknotes, as I said. Here you go, redeem it, and it's yours. But who reads the writing on these pieces of paper? And so slowly but surely, they took this off of the pieces of paper, and you have what you have today, which is a Federal Reserve note, which is really just a debt note. That's all it is. Luke, glad you're here, brother. I see my beautiful wife has joined us. Hi, sweetheart. Make sure I didn't miss anybody. Cousin Pam is here. Hi, sweetheart. Glad you joined us. Got Luke with us. I owe my soul to the company store. Exactly. That's exactly it, Nail Gun. And so slowly they bled off the wealth. After all, your money is no longer tied to precious metals, a practice that implied that the government could print no more money than was backed by silver and gold. And having removed that caveat on April 15th of 1971 by Richard Milhouse Nixon, they could then print as much of the worthless shit as they chose. So if they can print whatever they want, whenever they want, with zero accountability to anyone, why not just print enough for everyone? To hell with the taxes, because after all, they obviously don't need it with their own printing press. So why did they collect taxes from you? Jamie, glad you're here. So they have a printing press. They want $1.5 trillion for an omnibus bill. They're just going to print it. Now, mind you, I've pointed this out before, that 80% of all money in existence today was printed within the last 2 years. The last 24 months is responsible for 80% of all money in existence today. So as I said, so if they can print whatever they want, whenever they want, with zero accountability to anybody, why not just print enough for everyone? To hell with taxes, because after all, they obviously don't need it with their own printing press, so why do they even take your tax money? They don't need it. Brother Chris, glad you're here. The answer to this question is actually really simple. It is the mechanism by which they inflict slavery upon the population. That's why they've got people tricked into this false paradigm, this matrix, that this money actually represents wealth. And sure, my brother used to call it fun tickets. That's what they were to him, fun tickets. They just avail you the ability to participate in fun things and buy fun things. But folks, that's coming to an end. Don't think that this is going to go on forever. We've got a 98.5% devaluation in the dollar, and I'm going to continually point this out as often as I think necessary. And when I see them trying to pass a $1.5 trillion bill again, tells me that whatever is left, that 1.5 cents per dollar in purchase power that remains, is going to diminish quickly, folks. Okay, so with every trillion, think about that. If you can hand out $1.5 trillion, okay, and wind up giving everybody, okay, $4,525,583, every living soul that participated in the census of 2020, you could give, that's how much $1.5 trillion is, folks. You could give every human being in the United States over $4 million each. So what does that tell you about a trillion? So this mechanism that they use called money, and I beg to differ, is what they use to inflict slavery upon the population, because they've got everybody. Folks, there's this thing called fiat currency, okay? And that's exactly what our monetary system is. All money systems across the world are, of course, fiat. Anything that's not backed, anything that does not have intrinsic value, anything that's not backed by precious metals or commodities, something that has intrinsic value, okay, is considered a fiat currency. And all currencies are tied to the U.S. petrodollar, thus making them all fiat currencies, okay? So there was a time in the history of this nation when the value of a dollar, now get this, folks, and pay close attention, because this is how upside down our monetary system has become and why it's been so easy to bleed the wealth off this nation. There was a time when the value of a dollar was measured in silver and gold, okay? So the value of a dollar was contingent upon silver and gold. But thanks to a very successful propaganda campaign, piss-poor schooling, okay, and good old social engineering, you all believe, the world believes now, that the value of gold and silver is measured in dollars. I laugh all the time when I watch these videos on YouTube and other places when they're saying, oh my goodness, gold could go up to $3,000 an ounce, or silver could go up to $300 an ounce. Who gives a shit? All that is devaluation of a dollar. So the less a dollar is worth, the more dollars it takes to buy that same ounce of silver. An ounce of silver is still only worth $1, based on the value of a dollar, which was actually a dollar, 100 pennies, okay? In 1913, it's been devalued 98.5% since that time to today. And so to say that an ounce of silver, look, an ounce of silver could be worth $300. It doesn't matter. Why not just frickin' measure its value in pig shit? Because pig shit probably actually has more value than a fricking dollar. Take one out of your pocket. Here, I'll pull one right here. Tell me just exactly what the hell this is worth. What is this piece of paper worth? Anything? The best you could hope for, you couldn't even wipe your ass properly with it. It has zero absorbency. The best you could hope for is a paper cut, okay? That's what you got. And there's some fancy little artwork on here of a dead president. Big shitting deal. This thing has no value whatsoever. Zero. And yet people measure the value of precious metals, silver and gold, and other things in dollars. I'd rather have you tell me that an ounce of silver is worth 300 cans of chicken noodle soup, or it's worth a full set of car tires, or anything. New carpet for my living room, a frickin' dining room set. Anything. Who gives a rat? But to measure these precious metals in dollars, which is nothing but a manipulated, worthless piece of fiat currency, is just lunacy to me. So they've completely inverted our economic system and have done so having successfully bled off all of this nation's wealth, which was actually held in the hands of the people. But that's not true anymore. You know, folks, we could actually call gold and silver even a fiat currency, because it's used in the process of what they call fungible proxy. Okay, so we've agreed, the world has agreed since the times of Christ, okay, the silver and gold have value. For 5,000 years, it's been God's money. Okay, so we've agreed that gold and silver are suitable for fungible proxy. All right, so you take that gold and silver. Let me tell you what isn't. Gold and silver actually is a fiat currency as well, because truthfully, we've just agreed throughout history that gold and silver has value due to its rarity and multiple other reasons. Its versatility, its use in so many different things, and so it does truly have intrinsic value. But the fact of the matter is, folks, the only thing in the history of the world that truly has value, that is not fiat in any way, that would always be suitable in commerce, is your time and your talent. Okay? Those two things could never be bastardized, because your time is unreplaceable, it's irreplaceable, you will never get back time, thus giving it immense value, and your talent that nobody can take from you, that you render for fiat currency, such as gold and silver, which is the way it should be, but instead people have been brainwashed into trading their time on this earth, which is very limited, as we all full well know. But you've been brainwashed into trading your time, very precious, and your talents for this worthless shit frickin' paper that nobody had faith in 75 and 80 years ago. This currency, they've convinced people, this right here is worth more. What's a guy, not Andrew Dice Clay, he's that vile, belligerent guy. Anyway, there's a guy on YouTube, and he walks around, he's got a handful of Hershey's chocolate bars, you know, the big ones, the big thick ones, I love those things. He walks around with these big Hershey bars in the streets of LA outside of a coin store, okay? So it's not like the person couldn't just walk right in and take this gold or silver, and he'll walk around either with an ounce of gold, 1 coin, or a gold bar, or he'll have a 5-ounce bar of silver, and he will offer people in the streets of LA and other places, wherever he's at, and he will ask them, hey, what would you like? I have some ice cold frozen Hershey bars here, and I have this ounce of gold. Which one would you like? Now, mind you, the gold is worth $2,200 an ounce. And the people consistently take the chocolate Hershey bar. None of them take the gold coin. None of them take the silver bar, because their comments are, well, what good is that? What good would an ounce of gold do me? And you say, well, you know, there's a coin store right here. You could take it and redeem it for money. Well, I'll take the Hershey bar. That's how freaking dumbed down people have become. That is how brainwashed people have become in believing that this actually represents freaking wealth. If you're retaining large amounts of this in your bank and you consider that to be wealth and a safety net and safeguard for your wealth, you're a fool. 98.5% of this thing's value has been erased, leaving the purchase power of $1 at 1.5 cents per dollar, or $1.25 per hundred. Look it up, folks. This is truth. They haven't stolen enough from you yet, so now they're imposing tax on Facebook. I don't know how many people go on Facebook Marketplace, or if you have anything like that. Kip, glad you're here, buddy. I'm sure people around here have been on Kalkaska Marketplace, I think it is. And so, in case nobody's noticed, now all of a sudden, they're imposing taxes upon Facebook's marketplace purchases. So God forbid you should sell an old pair of tennis shoes, or an old dresser, or a half-worn set of tires or something, or a leftover starter for a frickin' 73 frickin' Chevy Impala. and you sell that on Marketplace and didn't pay tax on that, God forbid that you did that and the government missed out on robbing you of some more of your freaking money that it has absolutely zero freaking entitlement to. Zero. eBay's even done this. They have also begun charging tax on everything. Now, silver and gold here in the state of Michigan is tax exempt. You do not get charged tax when you buy silver and gold, and you do not get taxed when you sell silver and gold. And that's up to a certain amount. I think if you go over $10,000 in gold or something like that in gold bars, there's some caveats there. But in essence, silver and gold is tax exempt here. Well, try buying gold or silver on eBay now. There's no way around it. And so you inevitably get illegally charged tax by eBay, who has taken it upon themselves to charge this tax, thus stealing more money from you on behalf of a freaking tyrannical government that has robbed you of 98.5% of all of your wealth. Okay, so if you had a $100 bill in the bank in 1913 and you went to spend it today, you've been robbed of $98.50 of that $100 bill. So how dare you try to get ahead in this life and not give this thieving freaking government its fair share, so it alleges. So how are they supposed to buy favors from foreign countries if you keep any of your money from them? Because, just like I said, $16.3 billion to Ukraine, which is no less corrupt than Russia, most likely equal to. Look, fine, people are dying over there. That's just part of the fallout of war. That's the way it goes. Am I non-sympathetic? Not whatsoever. I despise the fact that innocent people are suffering. But I don't have a dog in this frickin' fight. Okay, we're going to get sucked into this. Watch some of the old videos on World War I and World War II, folks, and ask yourself, how important is this issue to you after watching these and looking at the millions of lives that were freaking destroyed, tattered, and shredded because of the greed and power overreach of government, all based on lies, of course. So they're not going to be satisfied until they have it all, and you are beholding to them for everything you have or need. Because I assure you, folks, this has been singular in direction for all governments throughout history, and that is to have absolute, complete, and total control of everything. Probably why the Bible says that there's going to be a one world government, a one world currency, and a one world religion. Imagine that. The things we've got going on in the world today, let's talk about a few of them. I had put a thing out on Facebook the other day. A lot of people have never heard of what is called the Khazarian Mafia. And this goes back historically an awful long way. And I think it's kind of important to point some of these things out to try and put what's taking place over there in Russia, or Magog, as it is biblically known. But the Khazarian Mafia emanated from this, from ancient times, folks. And it rules the world. And it rules the world through what they call Babylonian money magic. Some of the things we're going to touch on here is disclosure and bringing some things to light. The real reason why Christ was crucified. Today's money changers operating out of public sight, like the Federal Reserve, for instance. Money replaces religion as the new control mechanism, which I've been explaining. Babylonian money magic, the British Empire. The beginning of a domino effect. Riots, collapse, corrupt government of Kazakhstan. I'm sure you've followed some of this. This wasn't in the too distant past. Soon other dominoes will fall, and precious metals like gold and silver will rise, which we have been witnessing as of late. When people flight to safety, people are upset with their never-ending debt and have become overstressed. They're addressing their anger in what we see today as street protests. Kazakhstan is the cradle of the global financial mafia. It has been a wave of unrest, which began as mass protests officially triggered by a twofold hike in liquefied petroleum gas prices at the start of this new year, 2022. Though nowhere in recorded history was the art of making money out of thin air more developed than in the ancient Khazar Empire, which evolved from nomadic raider clans operating on the west caravan routes in the Caucasus mountain region, north of Iraq and between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea region. That should ring a bell with you folks, because this is exactly where Ukraine lies, okay? So there's a lot more to what's going on right now in the world than what people can even imagine, because that's exactly where Ukraine lies, along with other trouble areas of that region, is between the Caspian and the Black Sea. By the 10th century, the Khazarians had created a wealthy empire that stretched from north of the Black Sea to the Ural Mountains and west of the Caspian Sea to the Dnieper River. The Khazarian warlords decided that exchanging and loaning money would be more profitable and less hazardous than raiding caravans. This is where this began, folks. Trust me on this. Hundreds of years ago, there was one problem. The Khazar Empire was almost evenly divided amongst Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Both Christians and Muslims believed that charging interest on a loan, then called usury, was a sin. Only Jews could openly charge interest on loans, whether they did it out of practical consideration or actual religiosity. The Khazarian aristocrat professed a conversion to Judaism. Pretty convenient there, wasn't it? Some scholars believe the Khazarians are the ancestors of many Eastern European Jews. These would include the Rothschilds, who financially ruled Europe more than a century ago, as they still do today, by dominating the world financial system. They are the financial backers of the Rockefellers and other wealthy families. Important to note is that none of these converted Khazarians had any connection to Jews whatsoever, yet they profess to be Zionist Jews. More to the point, Jews are not Zionists, and Zionists are not Jews. It's really important, folks, that you grasp what it is I'm telling you here, because this has a lot to do with the new nation state of Israel. Matt, glad you're here. Troy, glad to have you. The Rothschild bankers, guided by the deep state cabal, planned to take over our civilization and exterminate up to 90% of the people through a multitude of covert actions, including wars, the poisoning of our water, food, air, and medicine, which we obviously can clearly see that they have done, and by a variety of vaccination programs, nowadays converted in the COVID-19 pandemic to round up the rest of the populace. Islamic and African mercenaries are being paid handsomely to take over the EU and the US. The deep state runs this whole covert black magic operation through negative Draco-reptilians, black nobility and Vatican, Jesuits, the monarchies, together with the Khazarian mafia that is run by Bush, Clinton, Nazis, CIA factions, and corrupted FBI factions. In fact, the entire system of agencies, judicial administrators, judges, lawyers, and faked courts are all part of this grand facade, folks, which has violated mankind's unalienable rights given to us by our Creator. Disclosure brings light, change, and healing for mankind and our planet. The story of what is going to happen in 2022 will be the greatest news story in history of mankind on planet Earth. The Khazarian robbers, with their criminal cheats of debt banking, inside jobs, mass killings, mass surveillance, terror attacks, aircraft drowning, and religious deceit, are disintegrating. 13 centuries of elite-led misinformation are soon coming to an end. The modern magic of creating money out of thin air had its roots in the ancient city of Babylon, some 600 years before the birth of the Messiah, Yeshua, commonly known as Jesus Christ. Handlers of this craft were historically known as money changers. More precisely, change your money from your hand into theirs is what they should say. When Yeshua stormed into the temple with righteous anger, overturning the money changers' tables with whipping them severely about their heads and shoulders, they ran out of the temple. Let me make sure that's off. They ran out of the temple while Yeshua declared, "Make not my Father's house a house of merchandise." These same money changers called for his death days later. So the real reason Christ was crucified was because his intention to reveal and eradicate the money changers. This is all political, folks. Make no mistake about it, this was all part of the plan. Christ and his followers were crucified for speaking up boldly against these evils of the Romans and their false Israelite Pharisee puppets. The Romans were already followers of those same Babylonian slave trading codes. So you can see how deep this goes and where the banking system of today, folks, has emanated from, because that's exactly what it is. It's called fractional reserve banking. So you put $100 into that bank, they're going to loan $90 of that out and hold in reserve $10 of that $100 you put in the bank, which is why bank runs are so dangerous, because when people go back and want all their money, they don't have all of their money. They've loaned it all out, and they're making money on the interest from those loans they put out on your money. That's the reality of the world we live in today, folks, and that is how they have slowly bled the wealth off of this nation, a little bit at a time. It's no different than us. I've used this before. Okay, so let's pretend there's $1 in existence today, okay? And here's that $1. The Federal Reserve printed this for the Treasury of the United States. So this is a debt note, folks. Don't think that this is money. It is not. This is a debt note. This says that the Federal Reserve has lent the U.S. Treasury $1. And now the U.S. Treasury owes interest on this $1 that it borrowed from the Federal Reserve. So where does the Treasury get the money to pay the interest on this $1? Well, that's simple. It borrows another $1. So now it's got $1 to pay the interest on this $1 that it borrowed. So it owes this plus the interest. Okay, so this is going to go toward the interest. But now you've got two of these bad boys sitting here. And now you owe interest on the new one. So where do you get the interest to pay that one? Okay, well, that's simple, because then you just borrow another $1 from the Federal Reserve. And this goes on and on and on into infinity, folks. You can never pay something off that in order to pay it off, you have to borrow more of it or print more of it in order to pay it off. And so the debt just continues to grow. It's an impossibility to ever pay that loan off. Exactly. It is a Ponzi scheme. That is exactly what it is. Okay? And sooner or later, people are going to lose faith in this Ponzi scheme as our money continues to dwindle down in value. And that's exactly what this is all about. This is what the Khazarians created. And they believe all of this emanates from what they call the Jewish population. Now, that's not to say that all Jews. They're talking about the Khazarian Jews, folks. Those that switched over to Judaism so that they actually could charge interest on money that they loaned. All emanating from the exact same place in the Ukraine, which brings us to another chapter in biblical prophecy, which is the prophecy of Gog and Magog, which I'm sure you've heard about. It's written about in Ezekiel 38, I believe. And so there's much more to this, folks. The present-day Khazarian knows that it cannot operate or exist without abject secrecy, and therefore has spent a lot of money having its history excised from the history books in order to prevent citizens of the world from learning about its evil beyond imagination that empowers this world's largest organized crime cabal. The authors of this article have done their best to resurrect this lost secret history of the Khazarians. As the Syrian Conference on Combating Terrorism and Religious Extremism, December 1st of 2014, in his keynote address, Veterans Today senior editor and director Gordon Duff disclosed publicly for the first time ever that world terrorism is actually due to a large international organized crime syndicate associated with Israel. That's right, folks. This disclosure sent shockwaves at the conference and almost instantly around the world, as almost every world leader received reports of Gordon Duff's historical disclosure that same day, some within minutes. And the shockwaves from his historic speech in Damascus continue to reverberate around the world even to this very day. We now know that the Khazarian Mafia is waging a secret war against America and Americans by the use of false flag, Gladio-style terrorism, and via the illegal and unconstitutional Federal Reserve System, the IRS, the FBI, FEMA, which we've talked at great length about, Homeland Security, and the TSA. We know for certain that the Khazarian Mafia was responsible for deploying an inside job Gladio-style false flag attack on America on 9/11, as well as the Murrah building bombing on April 19th, 1995. I'm sure you remember that one well in Oklahoma City. Khazarians developed into a nation ruled by an evil king who had ancient Babylonian black arts occult oligarchs serving as his court. During this time, Khazarians became known to surrounding countries as thieves, murderers, road bandits, and for assuming the identities of those travelers they murdered as a normal occupational practice and way of life. In 800 AD, the leaders of the surrounding nations, especially Russia, have had so many years of complaints by their citizens that as a group they deliver an ultimatum to the Khazarian king. They send a communique to the Khazarian king that he must choose one of 3 Abrahamic religions for his people, make it his official state religion, and require all Khazarian citizens to practice it, and socialize all Khazarian children to practice that faith. The Khazarian king was given a choice between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. The Khazarian king chose Judaism and promised to stay within the requirements laid out by the surrounding confederacy of nations led by the Russian Tsar. Are you starting to put a little bit more of this together, folks? Because Khazaria is exactly where Ukraine lies. And these Khazarian mafia still exist today, and they're still pulling strings among the families like the Rothschilds and others. There's so much more. Folks, I've said this so many times. The people you've learned about in school and throughout history, the names of all these people that you believe shape the world you live in, is all bullshit. The people that have actually shaped the world you live in are the names of people who you have never heard of. They are organizations that you have never heard of. These are the organizations that killed people like Abraham Lincoln. These are the organizations that existed way back then. That's right, folks. And the same organizations that John F. Kennedy was talking about exposing clear back when they whacked him too. Okay, these people have immense power and they are everywhere. And this is what it emanates from. The Khazarian king and his inner circle of oligarchs kept practicing ancient Babylonian black magic, also known as secret Satanism. The secret Satanism involved occult ceremonies featuring child sacrifice. Wonder why there's so many abortions in the world today? What would you call it? I'd call it satanic child sacrifice. That's what I call it. After bleeding them out, drinking their blood, and eating their hearts. If you don't know who Russ Dizdar is, and the book he wrote called The Black Awakening, I strongly recommend, folks, when I give you these names, please look this stuff up, because I assure you, the ferocity with which you fight for your freedoms is going to be directly contingent and correlate to the amount of knowledge and belief you have in the things I'm telling you. And so when I give you names like Russ Dizdar, I honestly am asking you to look this man up, look up these books I tell you about, and learn about this stuff, folks, because it is imperative, because these are the people that know and have exposed organizations just like this about satanic ritual abuse, okay, and so many other things. SRAs out there. That's what Russ Dizdar spent his career investigating all over the world. And they truly do this, folks. There is truly child sacrifice taking on. Where do you think these tens of thousands of children that disappear every year are going? UFOs? This is true, folks, and some of the highest, most powerful people in the world are participating in this filth. The deep, dark secret of the occult ceremonies was that they were all based on ancient Baal worship, or Baal worship, B-A-A-L, also known as worship of the owl, okay? In order to fool the Confederacy of Nations led by Russia that were watching Khazaria, the Khazarian king melded these Luciferian black magic practices with Judaism and created a secret satanic hybrid religion known as Babylonian Talmudism. Remember the Talmud? Okay. This was made the national religion of Khazaria and nurtured the same evil the Khazaria was known for before. Sadly, the Khazarians continued their evil ways, robbing and murdering from those surrounding countries who traveled through Khazaria. Khazarian robbers often attempted to assume their identities after they murdered these visitors and became masters of disguises and false identities, a practice they have continued even to this very day, along with their child sacrifice occult ceremonies, which are actually ancient Baal worship. Russia and surrounding nations have had enough and take action. About 1200 AD, the Russians led a group of nations surrounding Khazaria and invaded it in order to stop the Khazarian crimes against their people, which included the kidnapping of their young children and infants for their blood sacrifice ceremonies to Baal. The Khazarian king and his inner court of criminals and murderers came to be known as the Khazarian Mafia by neighboring countries. The Khazarian leaders had a well-developed spy network through which they obtained prior warning and escaped from Khazaria to European nations to the west, taking their vast fortune with them in gold and silver. They laid low and regrouped while assuming new identities. In secret, they continued their satanic child blood and sacrifice rituals and trusted Baal to give them the whole world and all its riches, as they claimed he had promised them. As long as they kept bleeding out and sacrificing children and infants for him, the Khazarian king and his court mafia plotted eternal revenge against the Russians and the surrounding nations that invaded Khazaria and drove them from power. Folks, one thing I can tell you is this, that Russia is one of the only countries left on the face of the earth that is not part of the global banking system. They pulled out of that some years back, and they refused to be part of it, which is exactly why this is taking place. There is so much more to this. Putin made a statement when he was going into, because think about this, the Nazi insignia, the whole Nazi system originated out of Khazaria. Okay, this was not something that Adolf Hitler came up. This came from the ancient occult rituals, this money magic occult rituals from the area of Khazaria, long before Adolf Hitler was ever born. Adolf Hitler only adopted it. So when Putin said in his invasion into the Ukraine, and very few people caught this, I am going to denazify the Ukraine, is what he said. Now, don't you think that's a pretty peculiar statement to speak about Ukraine, seeing as how Germany is a whole lot further to the west yet? So it makes sense, folks, that there is a lot more to this. I've said this before. All of the things we face today, folks, began in the Garden of Eden. Okay, this is truly a battle between good and evil. When it's, you know, the Bible gives us a lot of different verses that tell the truth about a lot of different times in history. And we need to pay attention because, as I've said before, I despise nothing more than preachers that talk about biblical prophecy as though it's always meant for a distant generation in the far, far future, that it could never possibly be for us, that it could never be for you, that it could never be for me. It's for a distant generation, a long time from now, and it could never be now. Now could never be the time the biblical prophecy plays out. Well, let me tell you something. Biblical prophecy is playing out. It's playing out right now. I don't know how many of you saw that there was a rocket launched, some ballistic missiles launched into Iraq from Iran, okay, into a U.S. It was somewhere near, let me pull that up real quick, see if I can bring this. But folks, what's in the crosshairs here, Iran says it fired missiles near the U.S. consulate in Iraq. But there was something in here. Let me tell you what this is all about. This is in rebuttal to some interaction with Israel, folks. This all emanates back to Israel, which takes me back to what I asked before. How many of you are familiar with Gog and Magog, spoken of in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, in the book of Daniel? Talking about the great army from the north, folks. And this is biblical prophecy playing out. So they're uncertain how many missiles actually hit, but this all emanates from Iran to Israel. Let me see if I can read this. Iran on Sunday claimed the responsibility for several missile strikes near the U.S. consulate complex in North Iraqi city of Erbil, saying that the attack was retaliation for an Israeli strike in Syria that killed 2 members of the Iran Revolutionary Guard. All of this, folks, I assure you, no matter how this is looking right now, this is Russia into Ukraine. And if people keep poking the dog, this is by far going to breach the perimeters of Ukraine. This is going to bleed off into Poland. This could bleed off into Germany. This could bleed off into the U.S. This isn't the 19th century anymore, folks. None of us are out of reach. So that's just one right there. So let's go to this. What does the Bible say? Ezekiel 38, okay? The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face toward Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And I will turn you about and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you out in all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in full armor, a great host of all of them, with buckler and shield, wielding swords. Persia, Cush, and Put are with them, all of them with shield and helmet. So I'm going to pull up a map here so you can better see, and let me pull this up over here so you guys can see this. You're going to say goodbye to my ugly mug. I'm going to pull this up right here. Okay, and we're going to pull these maps up. So we're going to go over this so you can see we've got Magog, we've got Meshech and Tubal. This is an 1874 map. Togarmah, Gomer, all of these play a role in biblical prophecy, folks. All of these. And so when we come up here, you can see here we have Russia. Hopefully you can see where my pointer is here. So we have Russia, Gog and Magog. All of this, folks, is going to emanate right here at Israel, right here in the middle. Iran, Persia. Look at how these countries are all packed together. People think that there's vast amounts of space separating these places. There's not. These people are all on top of each other, folks, and it has always been a hotbed, and it is filled with biblical prophecy in this area. You've got Gomer, you've got Russia, you've got Gog and Magog. So you look over here. Here we have the Black Sea. Over here we have the Caspian Sea. Here's Ukraine. These are all of the areas. Georgia, all of these areas right here, folks. This is where the Khazarians emanated from. And this is Russia, which is Gog, which used to be called Rosh, Tubal, Meshech. Okay, Rosh is where they get the word Russia from. Brother Dave Denoyer, glad to have you. But you can see over here we have Tarshish, we have Gomer, we have Togarmah, Persia is down here. And so you can see, folks, that this is a hotbed for biblical prophecy right here. This is why we have to pay such close attention, folks, because Israel is God's time clock. Everything is contingent upon what is taking place with Israel. Sister Tammy's joined us. Hi, sweetheart. And so, folks, you need to pay attention to what's taking place because this is global. And he shall make strong a covenant. I don't know how many of you remember in the Bible, it talks about a 7-year peace treaty with Israel, that somebody's going to come and they're going to negotiate a 7-year peace treaty. This all has to do with the advent of the Antichrist coming upon the scene, because whoever that is, folks, whatever country does that, that is where you're going to get the Antichrist emanating from. And they're going to promise Israel, which we've seen all of these peace covenants taking place, that Donald Trump had parlayed with his son-in-law. And so now we're just waiting for that final 7-year peace treaty to be forged with Israel, with whomever that is going to be with. Okay? And then 3.5 years into that peace treaty is when the Antichrist will be revealed and the restrainer will be pulled back. This is what the Bible tells us. In all of these countries that are mixed in this right now, as soon as I saw Russia going against Ukraine, seeing how volatile this situation was, there's no doubt in my mind that China is going to get involved, and they are. And you're also going to see Iran and Turkey get involved in this as well. And these are all, as I showed you on the map, are all right here on top of each other, folks. All of these, you can see Asia down here. All of these countries are right on top of each other. All of them. And it's nothing for Russia to blow through Ukraine, into Poland, into Germany. And it's biblical, folks. So we look at things like this. Pull up this. I got a couple other articles here I want to pull up. Something else to keep in mind. Miracle on the Dnieper, a conflict of interest. History has a way of repeating itself in the strangest of manners. In 1920, the Polish army, along with their allies in the Ukrainian People's Republic Army, surged into Kiev, okay, which is exactly where they're at again today. This seems to be, Nick, glad you're here, as part of an offensive to take Ukraine from the Soviets and create a buffer territory that would keep them away from Poland. The occupation of Kiev by the Poles and Ukrainians did not last long, as a counteroffensive by the Bolsheviks soon pushed the Poles out of Ukraine. They were now forced into defending their own homeland. Before long, the Soviet forces were closing in on Warsaw. This presented Poland with a do-or-die situation. Either the Polish army successfully defended their capital, or the entire nation might fall into Soviet hands. The Poles were not just defending their homeland either. They were also charged with stopping the spread of communism to the rest of Europe, specifically Germany. Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin wanted to take the communist revolution worldwide. His goal was for Soviet forces to break through Poland, then bring Bolshevism to Germany. The latter was seething with discontent, and Lenin believed in his ripe for revolution. With the Soviet army a mere 13 kilometers from Warsaw, the Poles mustered up a historic counterattack which inflicted a stinging defeat on the Bolsheviks. So this has been a hotbed for a long time, folks, and it continues. This is not going to go away, and it is biblical prophecy being played out right before our eyes, and we need to keep a close eye on this. I'm going to read some other articles here that I think are really interesting. These are ones that people should keep an eye on. Putin warns attempts to prevent Russian exports of fertilizers, oil, gas will have serious consequences. Now, this guy is nobody to piss with. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that any attempts to prevent exports of fertilizers, now remember, Russia is one of the #1 exporters of fertilizers. And when that goes, when that's diminished, think of the impact that's going to have on our food chain and numerous other things. Cattle, chickens, anything that requires feed. Oil, gas, and metals will have serious consequences on this segment of the world market and for food in general. Putin made the comments at a meeting with government members on March 10th. According to the Russian state-run news agency, the president has doubled down in his support for comments made by Russia's industry and trade minister, Denis Muturov, who previously said that Russia would redirect exports to other countries that were not hostile to Russia if problems with logistics were to continue after claiming that European carriers are not loading Russian products on their ships. Folks, this is going to have some massive ramifications here, and people need to pay close attention to what's going on. Russia tells U.S. convoys carrying weapons to Ukraine are legitimate military targets. Russia has informed the United States that it views convoys carrying weapons to Ukrainian forces are military targets. We have warned the U.S. that the U.S. orchestrated inundation of Ukraine with weapons from some countries is not just a dangerous move, but also an action that makes these convoys legitimate targets. Folks, Biden made a comment that if there's an attack on one NATO country, that it is like an attack on all NATO countries. This is exactly how World War I began. This is exactly how World War II began. Do not think that humanity has evolved to such a degree that it is beyond humans to engage in another world war, folks. Our capacity to murder large amounts of people in short periods of time is astronomical. And I assure you, the madman of yesterday still exists today. That same evil still walks the face of the earth today. And so we need to take seriously these things, as our government is incessant in getting its nose stuck in something that really doesn't pertain to us. Now, there's a reason that, and folks, this is so far above my pay grade and probably all of yours. Putin did not just arbitrarily overnight wake up in the morning and decide, you know what, I think I'm going to go fricking invade Ukraine. There is a very specific reason for that, and with all the misinformation that is spewed out by mainstream media and so many other organizations, none of us have a realistic view. I'm just trying to give you a little backstory from the Khazarian Mafia all the way up through Money Magic, the global bankers, the Rothschilds, and the rest of them. Looking at the diminished value of currencies around the world, knowing that we have murdered two leaders of two countries, Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein. We murdered those people. We assassinated them because they were going to displace the petrodollar off the global system with a monetary system that was actually backed by gold and silver. And they'll have no part of it. And so they went in and assassinated these individuals. They did the same thing in Libya. Folks, there's a reason for this. Weapons of mass destruction. Did anybody ever see weapons of mass destruction? We went into Afghanistan. We went into these countries. We invaded. We imposed our will upon them. And there were no weapons of mass destruction. Sure, they said, oh, there were some components here where they could have formulated some weapons. There were no weapons of mass destruction. How many times could people in this nation be lied to before they stop believing the bullshit? Because it's all bullshit. We probably ain't been told the truth in 100 stinking years. I showed you that video on Walter Cronkite and the comments he made, sitting at the right hand of Satan. Walter Cronkite. This country is in a desperate predicament, folks. Of all the elected officials, I've only seen one so far, and that's Representative Cawthorn. Called out Zelensky. He called him a thug, and he called the Ukrainian government incredibly evil. And that is an accurate depiction of the individual and the country, folks. Make no mistake about it. Madison Cawthorn, a Republican from North Carolina, said the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is a thug and denigrated the Ukrainian government, which is accurate, folks. Okay, it doesn't make Russia any less evil. Perhaps they're equally evil. Karl Rove, a Republican strategist, first mentioned Cawthorn made the remarks while speaking to a crowd in Asheville recently before a WRAL-TV published footage of the first-term lawmaker speaking. Remember that Zelensky is a thug. Cawthorn was saying, remember that the Ukrainian government is incredibly corrupt and it is incredibly evil and it has been pushing woke ideologies. And it is, folks. Okay, Zelensky is against gun ownership. He is everything that the global cabal is for. He is for globalism. Okay, he is about taking away rights of the people. This guy is nobody to worship or emulate. And that doesn't make Putin any more so or less so. The fact of the matter is, we got no business sitting there acting as though we have to support Ukraine. Why is that we have to support Ukraine? They're not part of NATO. So why the bleeding heart for Ukraine? Why the $16.3 billion to Ukraine? What dog do we have in that fight, folks? This is nothing but bullshit politics playing out, covering the banker cabal. It's all nonsense, and we're going to get sucked into another global conflict, costing billions, if not trillions of dollars to fight, money that we don't have that has to be printed, further diminishing the value of our dollar, creating massive food shortages in a world that is already riddled with problems that are going to create massive food shortages. The biggest global food crisis of our generation, folks, is coming. And I'm here to tell you that is a fact. By the end of 2022, we're going to witness very serious shortages of food in many parts of the globe. In fact, World Bank President David Malpass is openly admitting that we are now facing a huge supply shock as a result of the war in Ukraine, which we were already facing a huge supply shock. I own a garage door company. They're telling me I can't get a garage door from 6 months to a year. Anthony, glad you're here. 6 months to a year for a garage door you used to be able to buy in 2 days to 10 days. Tops for any garage door. Now it's 6 months to a year. And this is just one of many products that we can't get our hands on, folks. And this is only going to quantify that. So, of course, we're already moving into a global food crisis even before this war between Russia and Ukraine erupted, folks. According to the United Nations, worldwide food prices in February of 2022 were 20.7% higher than they were in February of 2021. Fertilizer prices have gone absolutely nuts, okay? And there's people on this feed that can attest to that fact. Jeff, glad you're here. Crop production is down all over the planet due to crazy weather patterns. We've seen this for the last 3 or 4 years, and supply chain problems caused by this plandemic, this fake stinking pandemic, continue to create ongoing headaches for all of us. But now that Russia has invaded Ukraine, that is going to push this rapidly growing food crisis to a level that none of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. Under normal conditions, Ukraine exports tremendous amounts of food and is considered to be one of the most important bread baskets on the entire planet. Unfortunately, everything has changed now, and this has pushed the global price of wheat up 55% since a week before the invasion happened. Ukrainian farmers have been forced to neglect their fields as millions flee, fight or try to stay alive. Ports are shut down that send wheat and other food staples worldwide to be made into bread, noodles, and animal feed, and there are worries Russia, another agricultural powerhouse, could have its grain exports suspended and upended by Western sanctions. While there have not yet been global disruptions to wheat supplies, prices have surged 55% since a week before the invasion, amid concerns that what could happen next. If the war is prolonged, countries that rely on affordable wheat exports from Ukraine could face shortages starting in July. International Grains Council director told the Associated Press this. I really don't like the shortages starting in July part. That definitely sounds rather ominous, he stated. Right now, the global food price is the highest that it has ever been in history, and Russia and Ukraine normally account for nearly a third of the world's wheat and barley exports. Now that exports from Russia will be greatly reduced, the exports from Ukraine will be virtually non-existent. Some countries will almost immediately be facing extreme stress. Yeah, see, Troy's on here, and he's attesting to the fact. War-ravaged Syria recently announced it would cut spending and ration staples. In nearby Lebanon, where a massive explosion at the Beirut, and I don't know how many of you saw that video, it was unbelievable, that explosion, but that explosion at the Beirut port in 2020 destroyed the country's main grain silos. Authorities are scrambling to make up for a predicted wheat shortage, with Ukraine providing 60% of its supply. They're in talks with the U.S., India, and Canada to find other sources for a country already in financial meltdown. Very high food prices caused riots all over the Middle East in 2011. And now we're moving into a food crisis that will be far greater than anything that we've experienced back then. Things are going to be very challenging for Europe as well, because Ukraine normally provides almost 60% of the corn that Europeans use. Ukraine supplies the EU with just under 60% of its corn and nearly half of a key component in the grains needed to feed livestock. Think what that's going to do to proteins, folks. Meanwhile, crops all over the world are in surprisingly poor shape because weather conditions have been so stinking strange. We all know that. The floods, the droughts have been just destroying the breadbasket of the United States. We also learned that it is being projected that China's winter wheat crop could be the worst in history. This is just a perfect storm, folks. The condition of China's winter wheat crop could be the worst in history, the agricultural minister said on Saturday, raising concerns about grain supplies in the world's biggest wheat consumer. And the USDA is reporting that a whopping 71% of all winter wheat in the United States has been affected by drought. Does any of this sound familiar? Doesn't this sound kind of like Matthew 24-ish, Revelation-ish, chapter 6? Any of this ring a bell? A limited supply of soft white wheat and primary type of wheat grown in the inland northwest has helped lead to a 6-year low for wheat exports from the United States. That was according to the USDA wheat report from February. The report also states that 71% of U.S. winter wheat is being hit by drought in 2022. Think about this, folks. 60%, 71% from different areas of the world because of different reasons. This is why I continue to tell you people, please stockpile food. There's no such thing as enough. There's no such thing as too much because, as I said before, how big is your family? How big are the individuals that are going to be relying on you or somebody in order to survive, folks? You want to see a country go into meltdown? Deprive it of food. And you will see social catastrophe on a level none of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. I guarantee it. We struggle to feed the entire world even in the best of years. And this definitely is not going to be one of the best years, by no means. Another factor that is going to drive up the cost of food is soaring energy prices. Look at the gas prices. They just seem to be rising almost daily. Consumers are now paying 50 cents more than a week ago and 67 cents more than a month ago. Of course, the price of gasoline is much higher in some parts of the nation than in others. For example, at one gas station in Los Angeles, consumers are now paying about $7 a gallon to fill up their vehicles. The average price of a gallon of self-serve regular gasoline in LA County rose to $5.24 a gallon on Saturday, but some gas stations in the area are even higher. The Shell gas station located at Olympic Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue in Mid-City was advertising regular unleaded gasoline at $6.99 a gallon. The price for premium was listed at $7.29 a gallon. So I suppose that I should stop warning about $7 a gallon gas for gasoline because it is already here. So many of the things that I have warned about have already happened, and things are only going to get worse from here, folks. In fact, I think that it won't be too long before some Americans are paying as much as $10 for a gallon of gasoline. This war is going to end up deeply affecting every man, woman, and child on the entire planet. If you're waiting for things to return to normal, folks, you can stop waiting, because a perfect storm has absolutely arrived, and things are definitely not going to be normal for the foreseeable future. We haven't even recovered from the pandemic that took place, folks. We have not even found our equilibrium from that crock of bullshit inflicted upon the globe. And here we are, finding ourselves spiraling downward into another conflict that could easily turn global. The things I've pointed out, the diminishing value of money around the world, we have no monopoly on that. Look at Venezuela. They suffered theirs a while back, and we're heading exactly where Venezuela is today. And we're not too far from it. I was at the grocery store, amazingly, in my area. The shelves are fairly well stocked. I didn't see much of a shortage on anything, although I saw food prices were up there pretty good. I saw ground beef, though, was sitting at about $3.89 a pound. Didn't seem too bad to me, to tell you the truth. But when you get into steaks and other cuts, you're sitting up there around $10 a pound. And this is going to skyrocket, folks. When we start feeling the pinch from the inability to get fertilizers, which is used for all of the crops to feed all of the animals, grow all of the food for everybody around the world, when that is diminished, because they supply approximately 60% of all fertilizers used around the world. And as Troy indicated on here, and I called my uncle even and let him know, if you want to get fertilizers, you better get it now. Because if you even can get it, if it's even available, the prices are going to be astronomical. Then compound that with the fact that people are paying such escalated prices for fuels in order to transport these foods, to harvest these foods, to plant these foods and crops. Do the math, folks. By the beginning of summer, we are going to be feeling a very serious pinch. They're estimating that it costs the average family an additional $1,000 a month right now, between the increased price of food, increased price of fuels, including fuels to heat your home in the winter months. This is all adding enormous amounts of money to the cost of living for families that were already living paycheck to paycheck. And I assure you, the cost of living pay increases are not keeping up with this. It couldn't possibly. So folks, there's never been a more important time to do exactly as our grandparents did, and that is do everything you can to be self-sufficient and independent of all mechanisms outside of you. Electricity, have a means. Heat, have a means. The ability to cook and prepare food, have a means. Some type of monetary ability to still interact in commerce, whether it's gold, silver, bullets, guns, I don't care what it is, potatoes, corn, whatever it is, something tangible, folks, something that has intrinsic value. Bic lighters, I don't give a shit what it is, toilet paper, whatever it is, folks, you need to acquire these things. Alcohol, I don't drink, but I have a vast amount of alcohol. I'll use it to trade, I'll use it to barter. I was asking somebody the other day, they're like, well, why do you buy so many guns? Or why do you have, you know what? If money is worthless and I need a set of car tires, and I know somebody that has a set of car tires, here we go into fungible proxy again, okay? They're not going to want my money because it's worthless. But maybe they'll take a gun and 200 rounds of ammo and some magazines. Maybe they'll take a case of frickin' beans or potatoes or who knows what. But you see what I'm getting at, folks. I don't smoke, but I feel the need to stockpile on tobacco products. God forbid. You ever seen somebody that wants a cigarette that can't get one? Holy shit. You want to talk about somebody losing their frickin' mind. But this is the world we could possibly be living in, folks. You think that about 80% of all our medical supplies come out of China. What if they were to put sanctions on us and discontinue exporting medications and medical supplies to us? What would that do to people that are on antidepressants, that are on anti-anxiety pills, that are on psychosomatic drugs? I think you get the picture. Just the lack of food and the ability to feed your family alone will send this nation into anarchy. There used to be a saying back in the day. It said that this nation in every household is 3 days from anarchy. And what they were basically saying was that most homes have about 3 to 9 days worth of food in them. And beyond that, they rely upon the stores and shelves being restocked in order to continue feeding themselves. And when that food's gone, that food's gone. We've seen with toilet paper shortages, we've seen it with numerous other things, that when panic sets in, folks, when that panic finally sets in, and people go into this panic buying, which is why I've been stockpiling for years, is because I'm not going to be a part of the problem. I'm not going to be a part of that panic shopping. I will already have acquired everything that I need and already have, because I don't want to be a part of that madness. It could happen fast, folks. It could happen like flicking a light switch. And so I beg you guys, I implore you to think ahead and stock up. If nothing else, let's say nothing happens, and I pray that it never does. Okay? Not that that's going to change what is inevitable. That is that the value of the dollar is never coming back. This war in Ukraine is going to continue. Global tensions are going to continue to escalate. We're not going to change the fact that we've already lost all of these crops, that we are absolutely in for a food shortage just based on environmental reasons, okay? Never mind the fact that sanctions and everything else is going to depreciate and deplete the ability to get fertilizers, fuel prices skyrocketing. You're not going to change these things. So the inevitable is going to happen. We're not going to change it. There isn't enough time. And as these mechanisms become broken, it takes years in order to rebuild them. Just the damage done by the pandemic alone is going to take years to rectify and rebuild, if it is even possible. So folks, pay attention. Get what you need. Don't waste money. Don't waste time. Take this stuff serious. Get out, stock up, keep your supplies topped off, keep your gas tanks topped off, fill some gas cans, fill some propane tanks, get some firewood. Do these things, folks, and put yourself in the same position our grandparents were in, where they could live and sustain life without any mechanism beyond them. I hope you learned something tonight. I appreciate each and every one of you being here. God bless all of you, as always. I want to make sure I didn't miss anybody in here. Let's see what we've got here. Let's go back to Facebook real quick, see who we got on here. Tomorrow, vacuum packing powdered milk, 100 pounds. Good for you, brother. Putin just asked China for help. Not surprised. Yeah, my house, yes, so is mine. 52 half pints of jelly and 28 pints of asparagus put up. Fantastic. Debbie, I didn't see you come in. Hi, sweetheart. JR, never saw you come in. You have a great weekend too, brother. I'm sure I'll see you around campus. So anyway, God bless each and every one of you. I pray as always that our Heavenly Father blesses you, your homes, your families, your communities, and most certainly this nation. Be with those innocent people that are falling victim to war in these faraway lands, folks. I love you guys. I appreciate all of you being here. God bless each and every one of you. Have a great work week, and I'll see you back here next Sunday. Have a good night.